G'day fellow coffee nerds. It's been a while, I know. I've been very busy with things supervising the final tooling for the J-Lever, preparing for this Kickstarter, which is a lot of work, all while running a business which is separate from this, which has just gone through its kind of busy season. So I haven't had a chance to make these videos. I want to update you on what's happening with VFiPP, its advantages and disadvantages, who I think it's for, and some future improvements that I have planned for it. So just a quick recap for anybody that's new to VFiPP. VFiPP is an extraction device to make life easier for people to make espresso. It stands for variable force isocompressive perforated piston, which is a kind of technical description for what it does. Basically, the invention involves two key concepts. The first is isocompression across the puck, which is critical in preventing channeling by keeping the thin filtering layer at the bottom of the puck from breaking down and getting washed out too early. But secondly, by variable force, I mean variable in time and dependent on the resistance of the puck. So in other words, we're basically aiming to manipulate the resistance of the puck using compression to get a specific flow rate during extraction so that we can manipulate the size of the capillary flow channels running through the puck, but mainly at the bottom because they govern some very important processes in espresso production. These are, firstly, the bottom layer flow channels act like a temporary fines filter. So these, in conjunction with the fines reservoir in the puck, govern the fines distribution that ends up in the cup, creating body. Secondly, they govern the ability of the puck's bottom layers to pass and release macroscopic CO2 air pockets that go on to get squeezed through these channels to create crema. And thirdly, they govern how much pressure differential is applied across individual grind particles to help nudge diffusion in that kind of one-way flow to produce a reliable high extraction. Now, to pick up where we left off, a couple of videos back, I detailed an airlocking issue with VFiPPs as noted by some earlier testers when using standard espresso basket that tended to mute the fruitiness of the espresso. This was particularly evident for fresh roasts and light roasts, something I wasn't testing or drinking at the time. And so we needed these kind of custom airlock releasing baskets with these a very large number of holes to help release these airlocks and to get the best out of VFiPP extractions. In the last video, I demonstrated how these baskets, when combined with VFiPPs, allowed for a universal grind size that seemed to work across all roast types. And this makes sense because CO2 is known to provide a significant amount of resistance to a puck due to the airlocking channels that get blocked up. And so if you provide a mechanism to release those and open up the channels, then the resistance between fresh and degas beans is significantly reduced. And then the resistance of the puck becomes strictly dependent on the size of the flow channels, mainly in the bottom layers. And VFiPP, of course, clamps down on and modulates these, and hence a universal grind size is possible. So that brings us up to date. These VFiPP baskets have arrived now, but as a final tweak, I've made another observation that have once again delayed things. Our buttons were set too constrictive, and this was a design flaw. So for example, our 7 flow button is not really a 0.7 as intended. It's closer to a 0.5 or a 0.4 constriction because of the way we designed it. I won't go into details. That meant the existing button set wasn't quite producing the flow rate that I wanted at that universal grind size, but that's an easy fix. We simply need a couple of higher flow buttons in the kit, which I've already ordered and they're arriving relatively soon. I'm very confident in the final product, having dialed it in. I'll be sending out samples to online reviewers now as soon as the higher 8 and 9 flow buttons arrive. Now for the advantages and disadvantages briefly. The main advantage of VFiPP is, of course, in their ease of use and forgiveness. Beginners can use a single universal grind size for all bean types and produce a high extraction espresso without barista skills, without needing to engage in this dialing process. Slightly more advanced users can take the next step, especially espresso drinkers, and adjust the grind size slightly coarser or finer away from that universal grind, depending on the freshness and lightness of the roast, which can be immediately assessed visually. So for example, if a roast is both fresh and dark, then you grind 2 settings coarser. But anyway, that will be in the manual. The second advantage is that VFiPP reduces the chance of channeling quite dramatically depending on the level of isocompression. And the third advantage is in dose flexibility. So you can pull almost any dose down to say 15 grams simply by changing the flow button while keeping the same universal grind size with almost the same fines distribution in the cup. The thinner the puck, the more flow inefficiencies are introduced with a knock-on effect on TDS and taste. So ideally smaller doses will require smaller diameter VFiPP kit. Fourth advantage for those that like to experiment is that VFiPP allows for a much wider exploration of espresso flavors based on grind size. So for example, if you buy a really dark roast that is inherently bitter, with VFiPP, you can use a lower flow button that's more constrictive and grind significantly coarser, reducing the fines reservoir in the cup and hence the bitterness. Conversely, for light roasts, you can grind quite fine using a high flow button to tone down the acidity and perhaps introduce more body and bitter complexity in the cup that's slightly missing in lighter roast espresso, so it's not just all acids and fruit notes. The last advantage of VFiPP is that it isolates your espresso machine from the espresso water, so there is less backflushing and less cleaning required. So to summarize the advantages: reliability, consistency, and versatility. For the disadvantages, first and foremost, the extra workflow in inserting and removing VFiPP plates and the paper filter, and rinsing both if you want to reuse the paper filter, which I recommend. Warming up the plate for very light roast is not easy because it's silicon, and there is a requirement for shaking your grinds as well, as VFiPP does require this. At some point, I will streamline some of these processes by integrating a fines filter into the bottom of the VFiPP plate, so you don't need to use a paper filter. The other disadvantage you might want to be aware of is that VFiPP is a consumable, and I've imposed a 1,000 shot limit, so that after that amount of espresso shots, you will need to get a new VFiPP plate. So given all that, who is this extraction technology for, and where does it fit in the marketplace? If you're experienced in espresso and you understand how headspace, dose, temperature, pressure profiles, pre-infusion, temp pressure, basket choice, and the interplay between all of those parameters affects flow rates, shot timings, and taste, and you know all about puck prep and you know how to dial in your espresso within a shot or two, then I dare say VFiPP is not for you. I couldn't convince, for example, Bruno Maiolo, the ASCAR president here in Australia, of its worth. I do understand that people that have extensive knowledge in espresso are not going to find much worth in VFiPP, and they'll just only see the added workflow. Ultimately, I think the best fit for VFiPP is for beginners, because VFiPP allows non-experts to basically stick to a single universal grind size in its simplest form and produce a coffee as good as you get at any good Australian cafe, without barista skills, without channeling, without the dialing frustration, and without really ever getting a bad shot once that universal grind size is identified. That said, I have to say, even if you are experienced in espresso, you might value the consistency and reliability of VFiPP, as I have. I've been using VFiPP now exclusively for almost the past year and a bit, almost two, and I'd never go back to traditional espresso. If I was to try and put into words, it's not just due to the consistency of the high extraction, it's that VFiPP relieves you of the burden of needing to think about dialing in. I think that's where I'd say the main advantage is. So it's really for people that don't have the time or the mental headspace to devote to the traditional art, because it is quite involved and there's a lot to it. Moving briefly now onto the future improvements. Yes, we will produce a 54 millimeter kit and perhaps a 51 millimeter kit. I'm not sure about a 49 millimeter kit. I suspect VFiPP will work even better on smaller diameter baskets with less flow inefficiency at lower doses. Specifically, I want to make the Breville 54 millimeter VFiPP kit a priority next year. I believe this is really where VFiPP is going to shine. At some stage, I also want to explore constant flow buttons, which I think might be even better. And I also want to develop a retrofit kit that can be integrated into an espresso machine group head. So the VFiPP assembly sits in the group head as the shower screen. So that's it for VFiPPs now. The high flow buttons will be included in that January update. The next video is really a second part to this video. I want to give my favorite and recommended VFiPP recipe, and I'll be talking about this mysterious kind of X factor that I bought up 6 months ago, and also whether or not you should stir your espresso. It's been a huge distraction, VFiPP on the J lever, but I feel like it's over now. We've really dialed in a great product. I feel that espresso extraction is a solved problem for me now, and I'm looking forward to moving on with other inventions after the J lever, of course. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.